Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. As always, I appreciate that you've joined me for yet another episode of the podcast. Thanks for sticking around. Today's show, I've got a fantastic guest lined up. It's Jason Gleaves. Now, Jason is a ufologist, a researcher, and an international author. He's the author of UFO Photo and the Ufology Umbrella. Now, he has his experience serving as an ex-Royal Air Force and British Aerospace Airbus Division. He has high expertise in modern civilian and military worldwide aircraft, armaments recognition and visualization. He's also contributed over the last 10 years on numerous UFO pages and media and has carried out photographic, image, video footage analysis on unidentified flying objects and associated anomalies. Now, Jason does specialise in kind of taking photos and video evidence of UFOs and proving if they're real, proving if they're fake, trying to debunk them a little bit. That's where Jason's specialty lies. And he's a really interesting character. Obviously, a lot of experience in the field, and I'm going to be asking him some questions around some of the footage that he's seen, some of the experiences that he's had, and what he actually thinks UFOs are. Because we have spoken briefly before. We both guested on the same podcast show, and it seemed as the show progressed that we both had very similar theories on what paranormal interactions are and what paranormal experiences are and where they stem from. So it'd be interesting to get a little bit more of his take on that. As I say, I feel like we're both on the same page, so that could be interesting. Before we get to the actual interview, though, some really good news. I have recently published the second book, the long-awaited second book. So, Experiences of a Paranormal Investigator can now be purchased from Amazon in hardback or paperback or ebook. You can get the ebook on your Kindle. And if anybody would like a signed copy, as I know some of you did with the previous book, you've just got to email me at paranormalparadigmpodcast@gmail.com or at my own email, which is kieran.woodhouse@gmail.com. I'll be happy to send you a signed copy of that. But yeah, the book's, it's doing well. I've done a couple of shows to promote it. Recently was on Paranormal Dimensions with David Young. I've recorded a show with Soraya on Where Did the Road Go? A fantastic podcast. If none of you ever listened to Where Did the Road Go, I recommend you go and listen to that. Really good stuff, as well as Paranormal Dimensions with David Young. That's actually one of my go-to podcasts when I'm in the mood for listening to something like that. So yeah, I'm just starting to kind of promote it now. It's been published a few weeks. So yeah, head over to Amazon and you can get yourself a copy of the book. Experiences of a Paranormal Investigator. Now, one of the main features of that book, I talk about the experiences that we encountered at that house in Essex. You might remember we had Kelly on, the lady who was suffering in that house with the haunting with her family. And it's calmed down a little bit now, having spoken to her recently. But yeah, we're looking at making a documentary. I've teamed up with a guy who I know is an avid documentary maker, who's keen on the project. And we're looking at just making like a 1-hour documentary on the whole experience, on the family and how their experiences and how they've dealt with it and how it all started, really, because that's the main message, how it started, and hopefully to show other people not to go down that same path. So it's a bit of exciting news, really, for me to finish the book, and my next project now is going to be focusing on this documentary, and no idea how it's going to get out there. Obviously put it on things like YouTube and stuff, and maybe we can get it on Amazon Prime or something. But I've not really thought that far ahead yet. We're just at the scoping phase at the moment. We're kind of sitting down and storyboarding it. We're getting all the evidence together. We're heading back down to the house soon so we can get some shots of the house and interview the family. So it should be good, and I'm looking forward to getting it out there eventually. Don't know how long it's going to take. I'm not really going to put too much pressure on myself for that. But yeah, it should be good. So Jason is coming onto the show to talk about UFOs, to talk about his books, to talk about his experience with analysing evidence. Now, evidence is a big thing that I speak of in my new book, and it's the future of paranormal evidence. And can we really rely on it? And I'm not sure that we can with CGI, Photoshop, and computer program software that kind of gets developed and allows people to forge fakeries and trick people into thinking they're seeing real evidence when in fact it's a fake. So I'll be interested in getting Jason's take on that. So as I say, thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show. And it's my pleasure to welcome Jason to the show. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Kieran. Thanks for the invite. It's always my pleasure to be on your show.
It's my pleasure to have you on, mate. We met about, I don't know, a month ago or so. We both guested on a podcast, so we met virtually, and I was struck by how much we had in common in terms of our outlook on the paranormal and our belief in what the paranormal is. And I was dead keen from that moment to get you onto this show and kind of dig a little bit deeper into that kind of stuff. Where I look at the paranormal in terms of ghosts, you tend to focus on the UFOs. So do you want to give us a brief background on how you got into all of that and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, people have ever heard any other podcasts or radio interviews I've done, it started really when I was young child, about 7 years old, and I had a sighting of a UFO with my sister in Liverpool near Aintree Racecourse, and this was going way back in the 70s. And basically, we were playing upstairs in a relative's house, and we both saw a silver disc-shaped object hovering outside the window. And then it took off at high velocity, and then we carried on playing like nothing had happened. And basically, I'd forgotten about the whole incident. It was only when I actually got back into this side of it, the UFO side, later on, that my sister reminded me of what had happened, and things slowly started coming back. So it's obviously some sort of missing time, missing memory, that type of thing. And then basically, I was watching everything and anything to do with UFOs, from roundabout then. It was going to the library and getting the books. And like everybody else, you start with Chariot to the Gods and, Eric Van Daniken and those type of books. And you slowly want more and more. And the TV shows were a bit more scarce then. But, there were good shows from Arthur C. Clarke, who had Mysterious World, and then he had the magazines and the Unexplained magazine. So I sort of went down that road with more of a thirst for the knowledge of what was actually happening, and that way. And then obviously things have happened over the years, incidents, and when I was in the Air Force in then 80s into the 90s. There was an experience at RAF Cosford where a huge triangular-shaped craft came down over the base. Again, it's all detail. It's all online. Anyone can look this stuff up. And I wrote about it in my first book, UFO Photo. But this craft, this triangular-shaped craft, came down over the base in March 1993. And it was huge. It was described, because it was witnessed by a lot of people at the time. It was witnessed by on-duty guards and RAF police and, other personnel. And it was described to be the size of a battleship. It was huge.
Wow.
And then it took off from there and went to another RAF base. And I'm saying that it was the same craft, but, I can't, it's really assuming, but I'm assuming it the time difference, and it was just after the Cosford one, Shawbury, RAF Shawbury, where it went to, or craft of similar description went to, and the on-duty air traffic controller saw the craft coming in and got the visual and the locks on it, and saw that it was firing laser beams down towards the ground. So yeah, basically, throughout, I've sort of not dipped my toe into the ufology side of it. It's everything's sort of grown, everything's sort of led on from one thing to another. And then I started up the Facebook page, really, because I started to analyze photographs of UFOs. And again, when I analyze them, I use Photoshop, but it's not for the reasons people probably think. It's to use the filters. It's not to actually change any of the photographs with anything else. It's to use the filters on there to enhance the images. And you can do that basically with any type of images. It doesn't have to be UFOs. You can do it with anything.
I was just going to say I've done a lot of it with like kind of spirit photos and stuff. And it's interesting what you get when you do that.
It is, and I advise anyone to go out there and do it. It's not secret to it. It's not like a trade secret or something. It's something I've sort of stumbled along and found that I could find out more information on photographs. And along the way, I've just basically gone into all the old cases of UFO sightings and ET experiences people have had. And I've actually debunked some of them along the way. And these are cases that I've been brought up on. These are cases I've read about and thought, wow, in awe of these cases right the way through. A good one that I recently, sort of debunked. I don't really like using that word, but I actually, was the sighting of the Solway Firth spaceman.
Can we talk about that? Because I've never really kind of come across that being. I mean, I don't like the word debunked.
No,
but I struggle to find another word. So I mean, I was always fascinated by that photo. I was fascinated by the kind of the innocence of the child, just sat in the foreground with just completely oblivious to what could potentially be going on behind. The person taking the photo claimed that there was nothing going on behind. Now, if I'm right, I don't know if you'd know about this, but didn't the person who took the photo claim to have a visit by supposedly Men in Black?
Yes.
Shortly after. So we'll talk about the debunking of the photo, but has that led you to believe that story was was made up as well?
I don't think it was made up. I think it was a set of circumstances that led to things being elaborated and, snowballing into a bigger picture than actually. I think the photo was taken in all innocence of the young girl. It was the father, Jim, who took the photograph. And there's all kinds of stories saying he was a bit of a joker. He was a bit, of this and that. I'm not really into that side of it. The image was taken and, like I said, I've been brought up on these photographs. So when you actually look at it, it looks just like a spaceman standing behind, just above her head. It's a very famous photograph. I'm sure everybody's seen it, who's followed ufology. And I just went into the bigger picture, the bigger, the Sherlock Holmes delving down, because that's what you do. That's what you have to do in all these cases. Just like yourself in the paranormal, there's no difference. You've got to do the homework on the background, the people, things that can cause anomalies, and when you've eliminated all these things, then you can start look out of this world type of things and, the paranormal side. But like, again, this photograph, anyway, there are other images, but they're not as easily accessible.
I didn't know that. I thought you only ever see that one photo, don't you? You never see like kind of other photos that were taken around that time. It's just that one famous photo.
That's the famous photo. Anyway, he was there with the young girl was there with their mum and dad on the moors or where it was taken, and on the other photographs. We'll go back to the actual photograph itself. When I analysed it and went through the process that I always go through on the Photoshop and brought the filters in and everything, it just looked like the back of a woman. When you changed the colours, it just looked like the back of a lady, a woman, wearing a short dress with the arms. Anyway, that was the start anyway. So then I started looking at the other photographs going into that side. And when I put them together, and you could see that the mother was wearing the same colour dress, and it was a short sleeve dress to the arms, and everything seemed to fit. And when you go back, and it was her mother stood there with her back, and she was stood on the brow of the hill. Then if you go back, like I said before, where I'm sure it's the photo was taken, and things sort of snowballed into the bigger picture of what it was, and then it went around the world on the news and all down that side. The camera, I mean, I even went down to the camera he used, the actual the 35mm camera that was used by her father at the time, and it didn't have a viewfinder on this camera, so you basically held it up to your face, roughly on your eye line, and that was the photograph you got. So right. when he took the photograph, he probably had the photograph lower down, so he didn't see that the mother was standing behind. Yeah. Oh no, the camera was higher. Sorry, not lower, higher. So as he's taking it higher up, he's lower than the camera, so he can't see that the mother's standing behind, and he can't see in a viewfinder what the photo is. So that's how that sort of come around.
Do you think though that because obviously there's always two avenues to I mean, you know, I've done the same. I've kind of debunked some photos, and photos I've captured myself and photos that people have sent me, and there's always that initial disappointment, you know, because it's like we're both believers in the paranormal, and when you debunk it, there's always that initial disappointment that, oh, that's a shame, you know, because I want it to be real, but we can't allow our wants and needs to cloud the factual evidence. You know, if something is false, it's false. We can't deny that. But there's always, it's done by accident is one avenue, and the other avenue is it's been done not maliciously, but it's been done with intent in order to trick the public and to trick the believers. What do you think is the case with this particular photo?
I think the latter. I think it was taken as a photograph. It wasn't seen by him taking the photograph of his daughter, and his wife stood behind. The photograph has been obviously developed. I mean, it's not like nowadays where everything is digital and everything's instant. You know, then it went to photo labs, or you actually went in a dark room and produced the photos yourself. Yeah. And it's come out, and I think it's gone to a newspaper maybe, or someone's got a gist of the story, and then it exploded, really, that story, and it went round the world. And I think that is when it's too late to, without getting egg on your face, it's too late to go backwards. So I think that one was one that just got out of hand. And I think a lot of them are like that. People are very easy to go along with things. If it's convenient for them, they will go along with it. People contact me with aircraft in photographs, and straight away I can say that's an aircraft or whatever, just because I know the characteristics to look for and everything related. It's not me just saying it's an aircraft. It's, you know, I know that it's an aircraft, so I will say. And then, but this is after, again, when I've done the homework. I've gone through the story. I've gone through the person, the location. Are there any airports nearby? Any military bases? Any private airfields? You know, the same sort of story. And then you start weeding out things. You know. Yeah, I get that. I mean, do you? I want to in a minute move on to like maybe a more positive side. So maybe a photo, maybe a famous one that you've studied that you couldn't debunk. Yeah. You know, that you've looked at it time and time again, and you can't for the life of you give any other explanation apart from it being a UFO. But before we get to that point, do you ever have someone
react angrily to your kind of, your decision. If you say, no, look, this is this, and I can prove that it's this, it's not what you think it is. Do you ever get people, they're going to be disappointed, as I say, but do you ever get people react and get all defensive about it and try and prove you wrong?
Yeah, you do get the odd person. It's more people are deflated slightly because they think it is what it is, but then I do state to anybody, I'm not an expert. That I always say this: there are no experts in ufology. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah,
we're all expert in certain disciplines. As in being in the Air Force or aircraft identification or photography. Do you know what I mean on that side?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
but we've all been thrown into this. There are actually courses you can go on now for ufology. Because I actually wrote part of it for Steve Merrer for his the photograph and analysing section of his course. But I didn't go on a course, and I'm sure the likes of Malcolm Robinson, and Philip Mantle and people like that didn't go on courses.
No, and I have to share my dislike for something like that, really. And it's only because what it does is it gives people a false, not a false identity, but like a false kind of credential, and they can then walk around saying, well, I've done this and I know exactly what I'm talking about and I know what everything is. And when that begins to happen, as you say, nobody has the answer, definitive answer. We're all kind of fumbling around in the dark trying to find out what this is and working together. So I appreciate how that can help people, but I can see it kind of spawning these kind of people that are going to be experts on everything, but not really on anything.
You see it, don't you? People making money out of it. I mean, big money out of it. Where they're doing shows and things like that. And I always go back to what I say to everybody. I don't charge anybody to analyse their photographs. It's my time to do the photographs, but I'm doing it because I want to do it. I'm doing it because I feel I need to do it, and also, I'm also honoured. I'm privileged to get some of these photographs, and people are sending to me to analyse. Again, it's my opinion. At the end of the day, it's only an opinion. Whether I think it's what it is or not, and whether they take that on board, that's entirely up to them, but I've never charged anybody to analyse the photographs, and I never will. Everybody should be given the chance to, depending on privilege and wealth and money, if you've got it, if you haven't got it, if you want a photograph analysed, and you should be on the same playing field as somebody who can afford it. So.
No, I'd have to agree, and I love the fact that you do that. I mean, I know people that do charge to kind of investigate houses. Again, you're talking about the spirits here. I've been lucky enough to be called out to some locations where I've managed to capture some really good evidence and had some really good experiences, and it was all down to the people asking me to go, and I would never charge them for it. And I know people that do, and I personally, I think it's really it's disgusting, to be honest. Particularly when you see some of the people what they're going through, emotionally, and how that it's really playing on a negative part in their lives. And I imagine it comes the same with UFO experiences. But I just want to get to has there been a piece of evidence that you just cannot debunk? It just, no matter what you try to do, it is a UFO. Have you ever come across that? Yeah,
I've come across plenty. I mean, the archives of photographs I've got, I'm talking hundreds of thousands. Some of the images I've actually got, and when I analysed cases, even if I debunk, again that word, but even if I debunk the case, I still keep the images that I've done, because it's a log, isn't it? It's a legacy of what you've done. But then if I have to pinpoint one really good sighting, is one piece of footage I was sent, and I actually wrote about it first in my first book, UFO Photo, where I analysed. It was an Argentinian pilot who sent me the footage he'd taken while he was flying his aircraft in 2014, I'm sure it was. And I mean, this footage, I think it's probably one of the best pieces of footage out there of a UFO. I've actually had it on TV shows. I've actually had it on Paranormal, caught on camera in the States and things like that.
Wow.
I think it was shown on Blaze last month over here.
Yes, I love that channel.
Yeah, I know. But basically, this aircraft. The story is that the pilot, he's unnamed, and that's the way he wants to stay. And I, totally abide by what people want. If they want, not to have their name brought out or anything, but he wanted to know. And he'd seen UFOs before when he's been flying solo on his own. It was civilian aircraft in Argentina, and he didn't have obviously a camera or anything with him at the time when he'd seen stuff, but he knew he would see UFOs again. So he took his mobile phone with him, and again in 2014, the images are not 100% like today. We got 4K cameras and really good high definition. But at the time, he had the best one he had anyway. And he said he saw these two UFOs coming in from his port side, his left-hand side. And he's filming forward. So this actual piece of footage is on my UFO YouTube channel. I think it's had over 300,000 hits on it or something. It's ridiculous.
I'll definitely put a link to that below the podcast.
Yeah, I would advise anyone to watch it because I really do think it's one of the best pieces. But again, what happens? He's flying. You can see the propeller at the front through the front canopy of the aircraft. You can see the cloud very clear behind. He's about 10,000 feet up, very clear. Conditions are really good. And he saw the two UFOs coming in from his left-hand side, and they buzzed right in front of his aircraft, and they were going at some velocity, to a fair rate.
Yeah.
And he's still filming forwards, and he's watching these two aircraft fly to the right-hand side of the aircraft, the starboard, and they go round into a tight formation and then come back in a pair in a tight formation and buzz his aircraft again right in front. And what the leading UFO is an elongated cigar-shaped craft, quite large, and then it's followed by a smaller UFO. And for the life of me, I've analysed this footage. I've spoken about it. I've wrote about it in the book, and I still think it's one of the best pieces out there. I would advise anyone to go and just have a look. It's not about getting views or likes. The whole reason of my Facebook UFO only YouTube page is because I started to analyze footage for people of UFOs and things like that, but I couldn't put them on Facebook because they were too big. Yeah. So I had to start. That was the reason I started up the YouTube channel. So it's not about likes. It's not about how many views you see. I'm not bothered about any of that. I just want to get out the information to people, so they can see it for themselves.
But it's refreshing to hear that, because I come across so many people, particularly in the paranormal world, but who have evidence, but they're just not willing to part with it. They don't want to show it off. They don't want to show anybody. It's like it's theirs. They're precious. I don't know if they're scared of people judging them or mocking them or proving it to be false, or if they're scared of somebody else taking it and getting famous off it when it was them that caught the evidence. I don't know their reasoning, but
That's probably it. Yeah, getting a fame.
Yeah, that's but at the same time, it's not going to get any fame if it's just sitting on your phone or on some hard drive collecting dust. You know, for me, the whole reason of what I do anyway, and I know of what you do, of course, is to get it out there, to get people's opinions. Because sometimes, you know, I've analysed stuff and had somebody else with a fresh set of eyes point something out that I'd missed, you know, because you can look at something for so long, you can't see the wood for the trees, and then someone says, well, have you looked at it like this? And then it puts a whole new perspective on it, and you start to look at it in a different light, which can only be a good thing. So I commend everything that you do, and it's really refreshing to hear that, you know, someone is in it for the evidence, for the research, and for the good of the field. Really, it's really nice to see that. With UFOs, it's a really tricky, probably really tricky question, this, but again, from the paranormal world, I have regular, not arguments, but debates with people on what a spirit is, you know, and at the moment I'm really trying to explore the possibility that a spirit didn't once belong to a dead person. It's actually just energy. And the ongoing question around UFOs is, does every UFO that is spotted or captured or filmed, does it have little green men on board who are flying it, you know, or is it kind of controlled like a drone? What are your thoughts on this? Could it be a bit of both?
It's pretty much everything you've said, and more. Again, if you go back to when I was first looking at things, I would always look at craft and UFOs, and unless it was nuts and bolts in front of my face, it didn't really exist. I mean, we weren't even thinking of, you know, multi-dimensional craft, anything like that. And as you sort of relate it, I think if the spirit world and paranormal and that side of it is closely related to ufology. I mean, look at Malcolm Robinson. He's very close on the paranormal and the ufology side. You know, he's probably one of the only ones that really is, that I know of, that follows the two closely. And the way I look at it, you know, everything's made up of coarse matter and fine matter. You know, coarse matter being something that's physical and you can feel it and touch it. And then you've got the fine matter, which is energy. And with the paranormal side related with the ufology side, the more and more people and the more and more cases that are out now for people to review and to research and read upon in books, you know, and especially my friend Peter Maxwell Slattery in Australia and James Gilliland at the SETI Ranch in the States. You know, you're getting a lot more of the multi-dimensional craft appearing and the beings, and it's a realm that we didn't really touch upon before, because, like I said, most people, just like myself, unless it was nuts and bolts, it wasn't there. You know what I mean? And that's something I've struggled, because I mean, I go to the problem is, you don't. Well, I go and give presentations, and they always end up being at UFO groups, because paranormal groups don't necessarily meet to talk; they meet to investigate. But you get a lot of UFO groups that will have a meeting, you know, and have guest speakers and stuff. So that's the kind of group I tend to go to, and I always push, as you've just, you know, so eloquently put. It's for me, UFOs and the paranormal are one and the same. And I would argue that UFOs or aliens are interdimensional; they're not interplanetary. And trying to get that across to some of these people, they're so fixated on the nuts and bolts that they just cannot, for the life of them, fathom that there might be, you know. And I explained that there's 99.95% of the light spectrum that we can't interact with, and all that stuff, and they just can't get it kind of into their head that that's a possibility. And I sometimes think, is that going to stall the research field? Is that going to prevent the field of ufology from progressing to the next level of research, if they're so fixated on the nuts and bolts and they're not willing to kind of open up to more possibilities? Do you think that's possible, that it could kind of plateau a little bit and not really progress? Yeah, I think it can get in the way. It could be a bit of a stumbling block. I really do think And I think it is happening. I think people are. Well, I say this, to a lot of people. We all go to conferences, we all go to talks. We like to hear new information. We like to, share our experiences. We like to talk to people about their experiences. And I've seen over the last few years the different caliber of person that has been going to these conferences now. I mean, we joke about it. In the early days, people wearing the tinfoil hats and to go for the ufology side. But, in joke, in hindsight, it is that way, but it's not like that anymore. It's completely different. You've got more mainstream people that wouldn't even entertain these sort of subjects.
Yeah.
That are actually going to the conferences, and people in droves are waking up to what's happening in the world. They're actually, waking up to experiences people are having and experiences they're having themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I slightly off topic, but I quite often go to watch people like David Icke and stuff like that, and it always amazes me every time I go. I've been several times, and I always just stop and look around and think, are these the kind of people you would expect to see at something like this? And you have the kind of people that they look new age, they look like how we would probably call a hippie or something like that. And then you have like the 20-year-old Adidas tracksuit wearing kind of, and you think, has he got lost? Or you wouldn't expect to see someone like that here, and I think it's brilliant. I've been to these conferences that you talk of. The last one I was able to go to was Awakening in Manchester. And
I was at that one.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and it was great. Again, great to see so many people from all walks of life all coming together. In the name of research, in the name of getting the next bit of precious information, and I think that's really good, and it does show how far we have come, I guess, and it puts a bit of positivity on it and a bit of hope really for the future.
Definitely.
I just want to talk about your new book. I don't know if it's out yet, but the ufology umbrella, is that out yet, or is that something you're working on?
No, that's been out since last year.
Okay, brilliant. And you broke down in that book, you talk about the close encounters, and you broke that down into kind of subcategories, which fascinates me because, I think a lot of people think an alien experience is, or a UFO experience is being abducted, but it's not, is it? There's so many different ways of experiencing that kind of activity.
Yeah.
Do you just want to give us a brief overview of those categories and what they entail?
Yeah, sure. Again, just in reference to the books, the first book I wrote was really what I do is analysing the photographs for people all around the world, and I'm not debunking cases, but it does happen. But then there's cases you can't debunk, they actually are unidentified. And I really wanted, in that book, the whole reason, and I never thought for the life of me I was going to start writing books. It was only through Philip Mantle, who approached, he's become a really good friend now, and he's the publisher. And he said, why don't you write a book? Why don't you put down what you're actually doing on your Facebook page, and the analysing of photographs. So that was really how that came about. And that book, I wanted to try and show people the breakdown of how I use Photoshop to enhance photographs and basically what I've been doing.
Yeah.
The second book was really followed on from the first book. It was more to do with the actual close encounters. And like we've just said, but most people have heard of CE3 or CE5, because that sort of term is being bandied around a lot now by Stephen Greer and all people that are going out for gatherings and sightings together. But a lot of people didn't realise, and myself included, till I did the research and got in there, and really wanted to find out for myself. That there was actually 7 separate categories, close encounters, goes from 1 to 7. And if you go through a little bit of a history of it, you've got everyone's heard of Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Yeah.
And he was obviously worked for the US government in the 50s. And he was brought in to debunk UFOs, and he actually turned coat and believed in them in the end and went
was
on.
Was that Project Blue Book?
That Project Blue Book, yeah. And sort of the story with that, anyway, initially there was only CE categories 1 and 2. I'll go into more detail what they are in a minute, but 1 and 2 were the first two, and then CE3 came out later on, and everyone can remember the Steven Spielberg movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yep.
That was what that was about. The movie was about CE3, and Dr. Hynek actually had a cameo role in that movie as well. He was near the end, where the craft came down on the top of Devil's Mountain or wherever it is. And really, that's where it sort of come from. But because in ufology, it's progressed so much, categories have been added all the time. And this isn't really set in stone. These cases can be sort of interacting with each other. A lot of people you can find have had like C1, 2, and 3 all together, or 4 and 5 together. They don't have to be just pigeonholed into one category.
Yeah.
But if you go in the categories, basically CE1 is a sighting in which one or more UFOs, aerial phenomenon, described generally as saucers and that type of thing. And they're not attributed to known military or modern day tech, so like aircraft that we know of and things. So if you see a UFO, it's pretty one of the most common sightings, and that's what it is, CE1. CE2, you go in, it's where it's been witnessed or associated known phenomena, so it's probably like crop circles, that type of thing. You've got terrain damage, landscape damage, scarred or mutilated animals. Again, you've heard of that side of it.
The cattle mutilation, I was big interest of mine, that was.
And then you've got the electronic or mechanical interference of cars, or where people said they've been abducted and their car is cut out, or that type of thing. You've got trance states, body seizures, some kind of unnatural physical occurrence to the body. So that's CE2. CE3 is visual, so it's a UFO visual, and that's seen and and it really it's going it crosses over, really. It's sort of a more in-depth thing where the object is associated with the UFO. So if it's a sighting and somebody has seen the UFO and they're associating it with it, so pretty much the film, Spielberg film. Then we go, it starts to get a bit more distasteful sort of thing, so you've got C4, we're talking the human abduction. So again, this is another category that has sort of come from the others, where people have come forward with abduction cases, when they've been taken. So from extraterrestrial beings, you've got visitations in that as well. So, and the person is not always taken on board the craft, so they can be taken while they're under the custody of an ET. That type of thing. Out of body experience is another way to explain that.
I just wanted to put in there, I don't know if it was yourself I heard say this actually when we were on that show, but people have actually reported not being taken on board the craft, but the craft actually comes to them, so their room almost becomes the craft, so they never actually leave their bed. Well, that's fascinating.
Peter in Australia has said that quite often. He advised anyone to go and look at his material, because I class him as probably in the top, percentage in the world of abductees, and with his material that he photographs. But he has said that sort of thing. He said where the craft will come down, and again we're talking multi-dimensional craft, so it will come down and sort of enclose the whole room, and then that becomes he's on board the craft.
Yeah, fascinating.
So, and then you going on from there, you got C5. So, you've got contact with an ET entity again through some sort of audible form of communication. So, you're either talking to an ET or you're using some type of telepathy, that type of thing. And again, like I've said before, these actual categories overlap. You can have so many different types within C6. So that's the UFO or its inhabitants. They directly cause injury or death to a person, or so really the only one I can really put to that is where there has been recovered crashed UFOs, and the military have said that they found body parts on board, things like that.
Yeah.
So
and would that be the obviously the famous Travis Walton experience? Where he was. Yeah, he was he was injured, and he actually believes now that they took him on board to help him,
revive
basically.
him. Yeah, I think that too as well with Travis's case. And then probably C7 is probably the most controversial, but again, this has come from the latter, what people have come out with, and that's in which a human or extraterrestrial mates sexual intercourse or artificial insemination, and that's to produce a hybrid type being. And again, this is, a lot more people are speaking about this now. Again, if you go to any UFO conference and, people who have had abductions or interactions with craft and beings, that they talk about this thing being brought up with them. So that's a basic description of 1 to 7. And then with the book, I wanted to go into more depth and put cases to each one. So I would just go through, and there's cases from all around the world. And there's one there from President Carter when a UFO followed his helicopter, and there's photographs in there, and then they're all categorized into 1 to 7. So it was, like I said, it was a follow on from the first book.
Yeah, it's I said to you kind of off edge before we started that this is what fascinated me about that book, because it's exactly what I've just done with my latest book. Broken paranormal experiences down into categories and kind of gone into a bit more in depth with each one and given some examples for each one. And like you just said, you do find that they cross over. So for me, it was difficult to kind of have what I classed as a physical experience, which is where you might have something thrown at you. That would also obviously cross over into what I would call an interference category, where a spirit can interfere with things within our world. So it can open cupboards and move stuff. So, of course, it's interfering with something because it's thrown it at you, but then it becomes physical because, it's directed at you. Yeah. So it is quite difficult to kind of to unblur the lines. So I appreciate that. I think it's really good that you kind of just laid that out, because I've been on what they call CE5 outings, where we kind of camp in the field and we all look up at the sky and stuff. Even myself, who I think is quite versed in ufology, I wasn't aware that there were 7 categories, and I wasn't aware of what they entailed. Yeah. So that's really good. I'll be sure to look at that book, actually, because I think that'll be a fantastic read. And I'll obviously put a link underneath the podcast for the listeners to go and check that out as well. So they're your books, and I know that you're pretty hectic, flat out working on a soon to be released documentary. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that's it. It's a documentary. It's been produced by Peter Slattery in Australia, and again, I'm in it myself, obviously. Where I've analysed his images for him, where we've got ETs and we've got video footage of ETs, and obviously all the craft that he's been taking photographs of. And And then there's James Gilliland from the SETI Ranch near Mount Adams. He's in it too, and Mary Rodwell. Just basically just talking about the whole thing, going over, and it's called Multidimensional. It'll be out soon. I think it's going to be on Netflix and Amazon Prime and all iTunes, things like that.
Great.
And yeah, I'm quite looking forward. I've seen it already, and it's been put together really well. I think it's the first one of a few that we're going to be doing. And I say to anybody, watch it, see what's in there for the content of what Peter's offering to people. If you go on his web pages, I think it's eseti.org, and that's linked to James as well. And a lot of people go to these places to have their own experiences and to photograph orbs and lights and beings, and then some of the actual images are just totally amazing.
Okay, yeah. Again, I'll be sure to add all these links underneath the podcast so the listeners can head over and check that out. Just kind of rounding it off, really, we've briefly touched on the future of evidence, and you're heavily involved in that because of the analysis that you do on footage, on videos and photos. From like the past and how it's been going lately, and the type of videos you're getting, I always find it interesting that how many are so blurred, and it's that kind of age old kind of joke, really, that why are all photos of a UFO or a Bigfoot or anything like that, why are they always so blurry? Do you have an answer for that?
Only circumstances. So again, if you're not necessarily going outside to take a photograph of a UFO, you're out there taking a photograph of a scenery or of a family member or an object, or you're not there to, unless you're going on a sky watch, you're not there to pick up these things, are you? No. And again, the amount of times that people send me photographs where they say, when I took the photograph of this, the mountain scene, the beach, or wherever they are, there was nothing in the sky when I took the photograph. But then when I went back later and looked at the photographs I've taken that day, or that week or whatever, the UFOs in the picture, and they said when I took the photograph it was not there. And I believe that because, again, we're talking about frequencies. I do believe, we spoke earlier about the electromagnetic spectrum. So again, the human eye can only see things on a very, very small corridor within that electromagnetic spectrum. So outside of that, you got radio waves and microwaves and infrared, ultraviolet, all those sort of things. But then the human eye can see. And I believe that the UFO was always there, but it was on a different frequency. So the human eye couldn't pick it up, but the camera did. So, I get that a lot where people say, and I believe what they're saying. I don't, I'd never call anybody a liar or anything like that. I believe what they're saying, that it's genuine. There was nothing there, but, there actually was there. It's just you couldn't see it. So, yeah, and again with the cameras, and the cameras have improved now. You've got like the camera I've got. There's 4K camera installed on it. The new iPhone. It's like amazing. I don't think I'd buy another camera because they're so good. And these are in everyone's pocket. Easily accessible. So yeah, if you go back to the old blurry photographs, and somebody's seen something and then they panic when they try and get footage. The camera's not focusing. There's multiple reasons that you can get a good photograph or you get a bad photograph, or you're just lucky or unlucky that you didn't get that shot.
Yeah, and I guess there's kind of pros and cons to the development of technology, isn't there? Because, we as you say, we're getting these kind of, everyone has these fantastic cameras now just built into their phones. It's just kind of par for the course. It just comes as part of the technology. But as stuff like that develops, and the potential of capturing, and as you say, things that are existing outside of our frequency range. So as technology develops and we can use infrared, thermal imaging cameras and stuff like that to maybe see things that our eyes can't see.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, on the other side, so does computer programming and programs that enable hoaxes and forgeries to be made. And I guess one has to keep in front of the other, one step ahead of the other. And whoever does that will ultimately win, because if you have enough software to be able to debunk the forgeries that are being made on this modern software, then you will come out on top. But if the software stays one step ahead of, the technology used to capture stuff, then we will always have that false evidence kind of, infiltrating the world of ufology and paranormal.
It's never going to be black and white. It's never going to be, literally, it is or it isn't. There's always going to be a question mark.
Yeah.
All you can do as an investigator or somebody who's researching into these type of things is to do your best, be diligent, and then looking into what you're actually, the case, look at the background, look at the person, look at the location, the weather phenomenon. And once you've eliminated all these things, then you can approach what you've got is factual. It's actually, it's not this, it's not that. And that's really the only way you can approach it. And then at the end of the day, these things still come down to they're unidentified. That still doesn't mean that it's a UFO. That's just think of what UFO means. It's unidentified flying object. So, people, when you say UFO, they just assume it's something out of this world. It's extraterrestrial. It's not. It's an object that's unidentified and it's flying. And you don't know what it is. It could be a secret covert aircraft that's being used by the military or secret program, and you just don't know what it is. So at the end of the day, that object is in the sky. It's real, it's and bolts, if you want to call it that. It's just you don't know what the actual origin of that object is.
No, and I think that's a really good kind of place to end it there, kind of a bit of advice there for the people that are going to go out and start researching, just always try and eliminate what it possibly could be before you start to focus on, the fact that it is a UFO. Yeah. I think really all that's left to do is for you to tell the listeners where they can reach you, because I'm pretty sure that some of the people that listen to this show, that they're going to have footage or photos that they would happily send you for analysis. So how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, if anybody wants anything, obviously I've got a backlog of people contacting me, but I do get through them. It does take me a bit of time because I don't like to rush certain things. I don't like to just fob people off. It's not the point of it, But if they want, they can send it to via messenger on UF only, or they can get it on the email address jasonUFonly@outlook.com. And again, there's the books. But if you go onto YouTube as well, the UF Only YouTube channel, I've made documentaries on there. They're all free to everyone. Anyone can watch them. I don't charge anyone. It's up to yourself. And again, anything that I've researched or put out there, I still say to everybody, get out there and do your own research yourself, because don't take my word for what is out there. Once you research it yourself, then that's your truth, and what you do with it is up to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jason, for coming on. It's been a brilliant show. I've actually learnt a bit with the CE category, so it's been really, really interesting. I really appreciate you coming on. No,
thanks, Kieran. Like I said, it's a pleasure, and we'll have to do it again.
Definitely. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. There will be a part 2 for the listeners that have enjoyed this. There'll definitely be a part 2. Take care, Jason. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks again.
So that was the interview there with Jason Gleaves. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. He, as I say, is a fascinating character, an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to analysing evidence and just the UFO category, and the UFO field in itself. over a decade of experience in analysing it and deal with it and talking to experiencers and people that have witnessed craft and stuff like that. Really, really fantastic backstory. So do make sure you check out his books. I'm certainly going to look into the umbrella one, with the categories in, so that fascinates me, and it so closely links up in many ways to my new book. Again, it's interesting. He did start to talk about the frequencies and how they're existing outside of our frequency range. And as I mentioned in the intro, that was what really drew me to Jason. The fact that we both had exactly the same theory, essentially. But he was looking at the UFO side and I was looking at the spirit side. So I'd be keen to kind of maybe collab with him on something in the future, because we essentially both believe it's the same thing, the UFOs and the paranormal and anything in that kind of field, they are all linked and they are existing on frequencies outside of our perceptive range. So a fascinating guy, and I'll definitely get him back on for part 2 because there's so many things we could talk about. We could maybe break the categories down even further. Certain parts of those categories, like the hybrid theory in the CE7 and the cattle mutilation, stuff like that we could talk about maybe. There's definitely enough to talk about for a part 2, so I'll be sure to get him back on. But as always, I really do appreciate you tuning into this podcast and giving your time to this podcast. I think it's brilliant that, it's doing so well, and I'm really proud of how far this podcast has come. And I've got some really good guests lined up. We've got Kenny W. Irish is coming on for a future show, the crypto punkologist, who's coming on to talk about cryptozoological creatures. His book, where he talks about the monsters of America. Really, again, another really interesting guy who's got loads of stories and loads of experiences to talk about when it comes to cryptids. So that will be a really good show. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. And until next time, take care.